Yeah, so I've been on a bit of a nostalgia trip lately, uh, with Half-Life and Half-Life 2. A big part of it is I've been replaying the one version of Half-Life. The main problem, though, is finding the exact versions I'm looking for. Because if you look into the, build list of the various versions of Gold Source and Source, it can be a pain in the ass to find the correct one. Like, for an example, I had the second edition Platinum Collection, which came out in 2002. However, now I got it in 2003 because that's when I had a PC that could actually play it. But even though it came out in 2002, it defaults to a version of Half-Life that's from 1999, I believe. I think it's 1.009 or whatever, 1009. And it has patches up to 1110. I'm not going to say the dots on it or points or whatever every time because it's so annoying to have to say that. It's almost like Stalker because it just has too many zeros. It's like 1.0007 or like whatever. It's like, dude, just call it 1.7, 1.6, whatever. But the issue is that I have a version of Half-Life. Now, I did have one called 1.0, but I don't remember what happened to it. I don't know. Maybe it's on one of my backup drives. I haven't found it yet. But the one I have right now is it's 1110, which is what the version I had would patch to. But the problem is, I don't really know exactly for sure what the other one's version was. And there's multiple different versions of 1.0. So apparently the actual first version on retail was 1005. Now 1110 like I have could be actually a couple different versions, and even though the executable says it's the one from uh, June 5th, if you look on the console in game, it says it's the build from June 11th. So it's like, why does the executable say something different? But the main issue for me is I'm just big on, preservation. And, I seen something recently, a couple hours ago, looking for old disc versions of Half-Life and Half-Life 2. Somebody talking about what I've been saying for a while. Because Valve uses their stupid rolling releases. I don't remember what I called it, but that's what they called it. Um, there's no real, like back in the day, and I mean, I remember that with, patching it to be able to play like the newest version of Counter-Strike or like whatever. But that's kind of the problem is that, the version that's on retail or that's on the Platinum Collection and then the version it has patches for, there's a patch between the two that actually introduced some, what I would consider major changes. But, when you're looking for the versioning numbers, the build numbers, I don't know, it's just a bunch of bullshit. And then there's the fact that Half-Life 2 Old Engine, which is I think technically a mod that I used to have, apparently it got determined to be illegitimate, which I'm not really concerned about that as long as it played mostly like the original or as close as I could get. I have my uh, retail box for Orange Box somewhere, but my actual original retail box for Half-Life 2 itself, like I had it day one of release day, whenever it was in 2004, but I don't know where that is. And so there's no way for me to really compare and know if it's the version it's supposed to be. Some versions are actually, used for pirated copies of Counter-Strike Source and like different shit like that. And it's just weird, like, the internet archaeology, data archaeology stuff. You wouldn't think it would be that complicated to find the correct version of shit. But with Half-Life, I've got 1110. I think is it build 642 or whatever the fuck it is. There was two of them with 1110 as far as I remember. But I wanted to play Counter-Strike Beta 1.0, but the version I have is too new. And I don't have an older version of Half-Life right now, but with 1110 I could play Beta 6.5. And I was messing with that earlier, and I actually didn't realize how much the Counter-Strike maps had changed through the years. I was aware of some stuff, like for an example, in 6.5 you can do the thing I'd read about where, like in earlier versions, the terrorists could actually take the hostages wherever they wanted to, right? Um, in later versions, only the CTs can move them, but like in the 6.5 version, you can do that with the terrorists. But I wasn't aware of how many map changes there were. So, like for an example, I was playing 747 because that was always one of my favorite maps. That map was so slept on, and I'm almost convinced. Like I'm pretty much convinced that the Modern Warfare 2 map is just a copy of the CS map. They just added more of the airport interior to it, but it's like almost identical. But there was changes to it. Now some of these I haven't checked yet, but like for an example, the thing that goes from the interior of the airport to the inside of the plane, the little walkway thing, the vent that's on top of it is kind of back underneath the walkway that CTs can run up to at the start. So I didn't even notice it being there at first. I thought it wasn't there yet in that version. But then I found it, and I'm pretty sure in 1.5 and 1.6 it was like further ahead. Also, there's some differences, like on the sides of the plane there's like a staircase thing that I don't remember being there in the versions I played. And then there's a little terrorist sniping spot on the opposite side near the tail of the plane that I'm pretty much guaranteed wasn't there on the versions I played. The exterior around the plane is more fleshed out. I don't remember there being generators to turn spotlights on 1.5 and 1.6. But I remember how much had changed between those two. Those are the ones I mostly played. Now, I had messed with the older versions in the past when I still had one retail version. So, like for an example, in 6.5, the thumbnail or the background or whatever that it uses, whether it's like the Arctic Avenger guy holding the one guy hostage, I had seen that splash screen before, but I don't know. I've been having some joy messing with that, and I don't even care that I'm just walking around the map by myself. I just think they look so cool, and something about Gold Source era maps and like mods particularly. There's this feeling to the maps, just a very eerie kind of feeling, and maybe to some extent it's just due to the fact that I'm playing it by myself. But I don't think that's the whole story, because I remember feeling that way even back in the day when I played, 1.5 and 1.6 even. 1.5 definitely felt more like that. There is something is also distinctly unique about the one version of Half-Life that Steam just doesn't manage to touch. And there's a lot of differences to where, I've been watching a lot of videos about it, just kind of wanting to see what anyone else has to say about it. And most of them talking about doing deep dives. Of course, it's not really talking about rare stuff you probably didn't know. It's like almost all of it is like probably some of the most common knowledge about Half-Life or, the other games. One example is there's this one I watched where he was talking about software. You may have noticed that there's an option for software renderer. And if you switch to it, you might not really see much of a difference. And it's just funny to me when I've been playing the game for 23 years on PC. I first played on Half-Life 2, or I first played Half-Life 1 on PS2 back in like 2002, but I got PC version in 2003. And so I was familiar with software renderer because I had integrated graphics, and I mean, I'm pretty sure it couldn't even run OpenGL or D3D. I don't know. Integrated graphics is a lot better nowadays, but back then it was a joke. But I had an HP A305W, and I played Half-Life 1 in software mode. At like 320 by 240 or fucking whatever. At like 12 frames per second. But even when I was 12 years old, playing the PC version for the first time, I could see the differences on this stuff. And then, of course, once I got a regular gaming PC and I could actually flip through the renderers, then I could beyond see a difference. And there's more to it than just software rendering not having texture filtering, or like, the difference between the OpenGL water and then the software renderer having that like animated texture version of the water, which I think looks way better in my opinion. But being limited to 15 minutes, I actually left a comment to somebody how, the dude in that video I was just mentioning, the guy in the comments said, "Oh, I'd love to see a whole video about that," because the dude in the video said, "Oh, it's not worth mentioning, or it's probably boring, or whatever." But as I responded to the guy in the comments, the dude that made that video is really not cut out to make that kind of video. Like, he had already shown with what he said about not being able to see a difference with software mode, that he's just not familiar with it. Somebody else pointed out in the comments, he didn't mention D3D, and he said, "Well, I didn't see one in mine." And I responded to that. That was another thing. A lot of reviews now are based off of people finding the games for the first time right now, and they haven't been playing them for 23 years, or they're the people out there playing them longer than I have on PC, and so they don't really understand. They haven't seen the differences, right? Like Half-Life Source was not that buggy on release. Yeah, it was a little bit fucked up. Really was more of a difference with Source versus Gold Source, how they handle stuff. There was some true glitches in there as well, but 2013 Steam Pipe fucked up everything. And I mentioned that in my comment. The D3D mode was in the Steam version. Well, it was in the WAN version, retail, whatever you want to call it, disc version, whatever. But it was also in the Steam version up until about 2013. Now, I haven't looked it up really, but I'm pretty sure it was, if it wasn't right at the Steam Pipe update, it was close to it, which annoyed me at the time because at the time I had an NVIDIA card, and NVIDIA can't do super sampling in OpenGL. Now, I also had Radeon cards back then, around 2011, 2013 era. They had something called custom filter anti-aliasing, and it could force super sampling in OpenGL. And they had, as custom filter would indicate, they had options for what they called a tent filter, which is just a bilinear filter, but that's way better of a transfer function for the reconstruction filter of an anti-aliasing, filter. And, holy fuck, games look so beautiful with that shit. Of course, they got rid of that, but then NVIDIA could only do it. This was also, I'm pretty sure, before DSR, so you couldn't even do the, like, kind of secondary way of it, like, internally rendering in a different resolution or whatever. I'm about to hit the limit on this one, but I'm going to, talk more about that in the next video. I'll probably make at least a few videos, 3, 4, whatever. But I'm out of space on this video, so I'm going to